So before I get started, I'd really like to learn how many of you have heard about Contentful. So maybe just a quick show of hands. Okay, that's pretty good. It's the full room. Great, well, we're gonna learn a bit more. So I've been at Contentful for over 1.5 years, and in that time, I've worked across 2 teams and also worked as the interim product design manager for a while. And in that time, I've learned so much from our teams and from the full organization. So I'll be sharing a bit of that tonight, and specifically sharing about our product development process and how design currently fits into that process, and a lot of the things that we're doing to try to improve and influence the way that design fits in. We're a small team of designers in a big engineering company. So first, I'd like to share a bit about Contentful and our product development department. So I think that this context is really important for everything else I'll share. So pay attention. Okay, so first of all, what is Contentful? So Contentful is a business-to-business software as a service. And something I've learned, especially coming from a background in consumer products, is that Contentful is not easily understood to everybody. And so we do communicate it differently depending on the audience. And so on our marketing site, we'll say that Contentful is seamless content management for enterprise teams. And then this is a peek into our product, into our web app. And this is a developer screen within our web app. And for developers, we like to say that this is an API-first infrastructure for content operations. And for our editors, this is, again, a view of our web app for editors. And we communicate that we're a modern content service which brings digital products to market faster. All right, so design fits into the product and engineering department. So I'll give you a bit of context on how we're set up. So we have our CTO and co-founder, Paolo, and under that on the engineering side, we have a VP of engineering and then several engineering managers. And there is also a bit of a layer in between that of more engineering leadership. However, on the product side, we're currently searching for a VP of product, and under there we have 3 group product managers, a design manager, and a research manager. And after that, we have flat hierarchy. We have 3 main product groups: content experience, organizational growth, and infrastructure, and then a layer of service design and research, and also a technical writer and agile coaches that have developed a lot of the process I'll be sharing with you. So if we dig a bit deeper into this, the 3 main groups, we have content experience, and so they are looking at how our developers and editors experience Contentful, so both inside the web app and outside of the web app. The organizational growth group, this is my group, we deal with onboarding new users, user management, user roles and permissions, and how to help customers expand Contentful within their organization. And the infrastructure group helps keep Contentful up and running. So you can see in these ones that are bold, these are the teams that are served by design. And so each of these teams has 1 designer. And so again, I'll dig into this. So the typical team, the typical feature team has a product manager, designer, and an engineering manager. And so these 3 roles are meant to be partners. And then within the team, we also typically have 5 engineers. So we have front end, back end, and a QA engineer. All right, so our product development process. Product design fits into this. I would like to think it enables it. And we'll see. And I'll share a bit about this. But first, one main learning about our product development process: as we've grown, we continue to change as a startup, we continue to evolve. And what I've really observed in the past 1.5 years is that every team is working a bit differently. So it depends often highly on the opportunity and the domain that they're working in, as well as how much they rely on customer learnings, and et cetera. So one big thing that really unites our process and makes it really visible is our Kanban. Are a lot of you familiar with this Kanban method? Okay. So something we do weekly is, as a group of product designers, managers, and engineers, we come together and look at the progress of each opportunity across this Kanban. And that there is our Agile coach, Harbrand. So if we dig into that a bit more and look at it a bit closer, we have opportunities in qualify, where we formulate and assess, learn, where we research and validate, invest, where we implement and refine, and then monitor. We collect data, deliver insights. Okay, great, but what does that mean for product designers? So in these two highlighted areas, learn and invest, you can see the parts of the process that are really influenced by design. And while we may help our product managers with the qualify and monitor stage, we're often specifically working on learn and invest. And so you can see as well, if we highlight this section of the Kanban, most of our opportunities sit in this invest area for a long time. And are a lot of you familiar with the double diamond? Okay, so this is also something that we discuss a lot within the product design chapter of this bigger department. And a lot of our research and insights fall under this learn stage, whereas ideation and prototypes fall under invest. So I think it's much better understood if we look at some actual opportunities. So I'm going to show you two process examples. One is a bit more design heavy, so it's really celebrating everything you can do in a learn and invest stage of a product design process. And then the second is a bit more typical agile process. Design is fitting into it, but a lot of it is product development and engineer heavy. So this first example, continuous onboarding for invited content editors. So as I said before, on the growth side, expansion is highly important to how Contentful grows and our business model. So something we've learned that's a big pain point for customers is actually expanding in their organization can be a bit of a bottleneck and be a bit of a pain point, especially for the person, this Contentful champion, who often is responsible for helping to onboard their team and even other teams within the organization. So the way we learned about that pain point is from our customer success managers. And so those are people that are working really closely with customers and helping get their teams up and running and helping them be successful. And something we use at Contentful very heavily to track customer learnings is Enjoy HQ. So this is a user research aggregator where we can track customer support tickets, any role that's customer facing. So support, sales, customer success managers, all of these roles will, every time they hear customer feedback, they'll track it into Enjoy HQ, and then this is something we can look at trends quite easily in. So from there, we, for this opportunity, did customer interviews. So all of those were scheduled with Calendly, and this is also a great tool to just directly put an invite on someone's calendar. And from there, we researched and synthesized, and all of this was documented internally on our wiki. So we depend really highly on our internal wiki, especially because we have a San Francisco office and several remote people. The wiki is the source of truth, and this is pretty much everything in our company. But it's also a really great way to onboard. So in this particular case, we learned that a lot of these Contentful champions within an organization are creating their own onboarding docs full of information about how to start using Contentful. And we felt like, of course, we can take some of that on in product design as part of product onboarding. So we looked across a lot of those docs, a lot of the trends, and synthesized this research, and again, documented it on the wiki. So from there, once we had some big insights to work with, we did a design studio. So this method is something we use quite a bit at Contentful. One reason is to get engineers involved and start to get them involved in the process of something that they might start to implement. And then also other stakeholders, so our customer success manager and other designers. And so this is usually typically like a 2-hour workshop where we do rapid ideation sessions and get a lot of ideas out quickly. Right. So after a session like that, we have all of these ideas, and then the question comes up, well, how do we move these ideas forward? Which ones do we choose? We just choose our favorites. What's a democratic method to move this forward? And something that we use is the NUF method. So we qualify everything by how new, useful, or feasible it is, and we assign a point value. And we actually added a column as well for some opportunities of, will this create new problems in the product? So from there, we wanted to learn from the same customers we originally did interviews with. Okay, we have some ideas. Do you think that this would be useful for your team? Will this solve your problem? So rather than doing a customer interview for usability testing, it's, is this useful? And again, we scheduled it with Calendly. And again, documenting on the wiki and sharing findings. This is a huge learning, and I've shared it just in the middle of this slide because I feel like we're always learning, and especially this comes up, I think, weekly for the whole company. Documentation is king at Contentful. So from there, we scope the project. So developers and designers will get together and say, in a t-shirt size, how big do we think that this project is? So we'll scope it small, medium, large, XL. So it's a good way to go into it without an actual sprint estimate, but with a good idea of how much effort it might take. And from there, we can start to develop a pitch, and the product manager will go to our product board, which is a group of, it's our CTO, product director, and a product marketing manager, and they'll decide before we put engineering time into investing, is this a good idea? Is this a good plan? And from there, the design process continues. We make UI prototypes, make sure that the usability of what we're creating works well. And for this, we use Envision and often usertesting.com. And so I'll tell you a bit about the project. So in this case, we learned from all of this customer documentation that customers were documenting for their new editors and new team members what is Contentful. So they were actually trying to explain what reusable content is and why they chose to go with Contentful. So we felt like we could take that on and make a video. And then also we did a UI walkthrough. So we also learned that customers were actually doing a call out of the UI and saying, like, this is what happens in this tab, this is what happens in this tab. So we decided to take care of that also in the product onboarding. So the next part of the process was to actually validate the script with stakeholders and marketing writers. And so something at Contentful that's, I think, unique about product designers is we're really generalists and doing things across the board. So we're doing research, we're doing sometimes video development, script writing, a lot of stuff. And so finally, we made the final UI design after we verified it with that first round of usability testing. It went into production, and we released. So from there, it went into the monitor stage. We attached a Typeform survey to the video and CSM feedback, customer feedback. So that's a really heavy-handed example of product design at Contentful. What most opportunities look like is a bit more like this. So we work in quite agile teams. I think something that's interesting is we've started to hire more designers, but before that, a lot of teams are operating without a designer. And so they started a development process that excluded design. And so designers have to kind of understand how to work with a team to start bringing design processes in. So in this example, we wanted to expand a new feature we created. And so a bit about the feature. So the way Contentful works is you have an organization and within the product, and then each organization can have several spaces, and this is how we monetize. So by the number of spaces a company has. So we introduced this new feature, Teams, to allow a user management admin to manage many users in one place. So we had already added it to the org, and now we needed to add it into the space. So qualify was not totally necessary for this opportunity because it was an extension of a previous feature. Learn, we did look at the data on how customer organizations were currently using this feature, although it was pretty new, so there wasn't a lot of data to go off of. And then invest directly started with working with the full team, all of the engineers, and doing user story mapping as a team. So here we broke down the features and started to plan the development. So a few of the design processes, we still built UI prototypes, shared with the developers in InVision, did user testing of the prototypes, revised them. We sometimes, for more simple screens, we'll do hallway testing. So we'll get all of the new starters at Contentful. And then revising the prototype for development. And then from there, a lot of the design work was just helping QA and make kind of on-the-fly decisions. And then and now we monitor. So this was released recently. So that, I think, is a much different example than the first, and a much more typical example of how designers fit into this agile process. So one big learning, especially with this team, is plan and communicate all of the design tasks that we want to do for an opportunity before it's scoped. So for this example, they committed to releasing this in maybe 6 sprints. And so adding any design process into that scoping wasn't a popular choice after it had been scoped. All right, so that's the department and a bit of an overview of our process. But now the fun part, I'd love to tell you about our team. So our product design and research chapter, we have 6 designers, 3 researchers, qualitative and quantitative, and then 2 UI engineers. And something I've really learned from this team, so you've seen in this earlier process that all of our work is happening within the feature teams, but as a chapter, we want to move forward. We've, for example, recently started the initiative to create a design system, and all of this was done independent. So oftentimes there's a dedicated team to work on a design system, and we've done this independently outside of our feature work. And what we've learned is we just need to get started and make it happen. And after kind of a grassroots initiative, we started getting actual product development time dedicated and approved from leadership. So as a chapter, we're actually, even though we don't work together, we're actually quite close. We work together a lot, share ideas a lot, and I think encourage and kind of push each other's design choices a lot. So how do we do that? We have a weekly design sharing session. We have monthly strategy sessions, retrospectives, and then an annual design retreat. So actually next weekend we're going hiking. And we also have things we do as a greater chapter. So a strategy session along with the PMs and product and development all hands. So something we've also been trying to do as a design chapter, these are things that come out of our retrospectives. When we think after a quarter is over, we look at how the quarter went and what we want to change. This is where a lot of our ideas about how we can influence design in the company have really come from, because we've thought about how can we get product managers to work with us a bit differently? How can we really influence design across the organization? So here we are, evangelizing design. So we've come up with a few ideas, and a lot of these have been put into practice. And I think we've also made a few new hires in the past year, and I think we've really started to see design take off a bit more at Contentful. So it's been pretty exciting. So after one of these retrospectives, we made a bit of a hypothesis. Maybe these feature teams don't completely understand the value of design and how it can fit in. So if we as designers make this process more visible, more transparent over some small steps, then we will see greater understanding among the teams and hopefully more room for design and scoping. So that was our goal, create greater understanding of the product design process within the teams. So a few ways that we've really dedicated ourselves to doing that. Keeping engineers involved in everything. So design sprints are always with engineers. Customer discovery interviews, trying to encourage engineers to join these interviews. The design studio and the NUF method that I shared before. And then as well as user testing. So especially I think it's interesting for front-end developers that are making the product while it's in development to bring them along to user test and to see how some of these small things like just extra spacing that's hiding a button can affect user testing, can affect a user's response to the design that we see in testing. Then QA sessions, of course, and hackathons. And hackathons are actually a very big developer experience at Contentful that designers are just part of in this case. Another big thing that I think we've all started doing a lot more is making all of our work more transparent. So things that we think, oh, maybe the engineers don't need to know this, maybe they don't care. Things like sharing our research plan before we get started and the synthesis, especially in a more waterfall approach where we don't bring in engineers right away. Also, sharing interesting things that we're getting excited about as designers. I think that actually the team likes to hear it and they care, so trying to share that as we learn. And also, we do a lot of interesting things in the design and product strategy meetings, and so starting to share that with the teams as well. And also inviting other stakeholders to our stand-ups and track the work we're doing on the team Jira board. So if we're doing things for the design system or we're interviewing candidates, making sure that we put that work and make it visible on our team Jira board. And then retrospectives. So every sprint we have a retrospective with the feature team and really pointing out, okay, I think in this sprint, it would have been really helpful if we did this differently for design. And so a few final learnings about this process of evangelizing design. Find a design ally on the feature team. So I've learned that actually our front-end, this is not a front-end developer, but actually our front-end engineers really appreciate design, and in our absence, they are championing design. So finding an ally. And so that was feature level. What can we do at a company level? So hopefully if we're thinking big and getting the design influence across the company, it'll also have a trickle-down effect into the future team. So make designers a part of every early opportunity planning, quarterly planning, share the design work that we're doing kind of as a chapter at bigger company events, such as the Sprint Bazaar. And so every sprint, we have a bazaar, and it's just a chance, kind of like a science fair, to share our product design work, what every team is working on. So also trying to share design work at that. Sharing updates at these bigger company events. We started a monthly product newsletter that was a lot of engineering related information and making sure that design got a part in there. And then overall, just keeping the process visible and never miss an opportunity to share a bit of tidbit about the design process, because you never know who your next design ally might be. So finally, plan years ahead. Something that I think that we do really well is these future strategy sessions. So actually recently we've been doing quite a bit between product designers and product managers, looking at trends and looking 5 years, 10 years in advance and looking at how Contentful will fit into these technology trends. And then finally, the number one learning, just celebrate where design is at right now and where it's going. So we're a great team. We've already made a lot of progress in influencing design across this organization. And it's okay to just stop and appreciate where we're at. Okay, and this is just to prove that we're a fun team, because I know B2B can be not so glamorous. So this is just to prove that it's a really fun group of people. And we're hiring some product roles, a product designer and a UI engineer, and many more. And if you're interested in design systems, we are part of a coalition group where we are learning from other companies, and we're hosting the next one on September 3rd. And finally, Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sarah. Now time for the questions. And there's the question number 1. What's your name? What's your role? And what is your question?
Yeah, so my name is Sandra Dadler, and I'm the Director Content and Creative at Advico. I would like to know how many people work at Contentful overall, altogether.
Sure.
Just curious.
It's a good question. It changes every month. Right now, I think we're at maybe 230, and around 30 of those people are in San Francisco. And actually, the whole company came this week we have our offsite in Brandenburg at the end of the week. And so all of San Francisco's here, and there's a lot of new faces. So we're growing pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I was at your office, I believe, a year ago, and you were somewhere about 180 or so. Mm-hmm. So really growing steadily. What's your name? What's your title? And what is your question?
Thank you. My name is Cristiano. I'm a product designer at Vitex. It's a Brazilian e-commerce platform. And my question is, I found it very interesting, the structure of the company. Like, you have some hierarchy and then some non-hierarchical section. Mm-hmm. And how do you interface these two worlds that are so different?
I think that's kind of an older value that worked really well at Contentful, as it was a startup before it got too big. I think what we're seeing actually pretty recently is that we've started to do leveling within the engineering department, slowly leveling. Product design doesn't have levels yet, although we have kind of invisible levels where just depending on people that have identified themselves as more junior that want help. So the flat hierarchy has worked so far. I think it may not continue to work as we scale.
If you want to know more about the hierarchy of Contentful, there's actually an interview with the head of product, which took part last year on a conference in Cologne, and he talks a little bit about that. So on Digitale Leute, you will find more information about that. More questions? One question here. Hi. What's your name, your role, and your question?
Hi, my name is Milad. I'm senior sales manager at Exemplary, influencer marketing. I was just curious. You talked about Confluence and how important it is to keep everything in there for your team. How do you make sure that people actually work with it? Because my prior company, a lot was documented in there, but the usage is something else than just to document it. And how do you keep it efficient in the end of the day?
Very good question.
That is a good question. You know, for some reason, I feel like everybody just advocates for it. So I think if everyone's championing for it, especially older people encouraging new people to make sure they document everything. But I've been in several situations where there's always one person in the room that's asking, who's documenting this? You know, who's putting it on Confluence? And also I've been in situations where I thought maybe I've made small design decisions that don't need to be documented. And I've come back 2 weeks later with questions of well, where's the documentation on this? And so I think that it's a really strong value. And especially it's helped as people come and go, and our San Francisco office is trying to stay up to date on what product development's doing. It's just a lot of internal champions for documentation.
Do you have somebody which is like the musketeer of it, like wears the hat of Confluence and everybody and says all the time, please document everything, or how is that organized? I mean, somehow the message must be communicated, you know? Mm-hmm. How do you do that? Interesting.
We don't really have that. I think it is interesting how well it's working, considering that we don't have that, but yeah, it's working.
It's magic. Sometimes it's just magic. Or when people just like to work on a product and love the product and want to bring it forward, might be that people actually use such tools voluntarily. Sometimes that happens, you know. Might also be. More questions? Another question here. Hello. What's your name, your role, and your question, please?
I'm Mohit Anand, and I'm a client success manager. I was curious, to what extent does the design and product team sort of team up with customer success managers to interview clients? Is it more sort of dependent on the CSMs to interview, document, and then convey insights to you guys?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. And actually, it's a really great relationship. It's one of the best relationships between design and customer success managers because we really depend on those insights. And so for the examples of where we were scheduling interviews with customers, there's a bit of a process with customer success managers where we first need to ask which customers are having these problems, and then which customers off that list are willing to do interviews, and then also which customers are willing to do interviews right now, because customers are at different stages of maybe sales conversations where it might not be a good time to reach out. And so there's a few layers like that. And actually something that started the customer success team and a lot of teams started doing in the past year is office hours. And so it's a really good chance because also customer success managers are traveling a lot and quite busy. And so they found a time when they could all be in a room to do office hours. And it's, for designers especially, a really great time to go in and run ideas by them and maybe follow up on interview scheduling and things like that.
Thank you. And I would say that's enough for now. If you have more questions, please ask them later. Thanks again. Sarah, a round of applause, please.